What is it? May every day be another wonderful secret. That's the line.
Now I get it.
Now you get what I'm going for.
Yes, I know where that's coming from. Our glorious leader.
Dear leader. Speaking of dear leader, I mean, I think as we welcome everyone to another episode here of Idiot Seeking Village, Adam, a red dawn. We're not even recording 36 hours away from the dawn of Chairman Mamdani's reign over the city and the 5 boroughs of New York. He's defeated Andrew Kai-shek and his Kuomintang forces and forced them to flee to Florida. How do you feel about this? How do you feel about this? Yeah, the hammer and the crescent moon rising over New York City.
I gotta be careful that the red spread doesn't, keep going and take over other parts of New York. So did Cuomo really leave New York?
That's what he said during the campaign. He was like, I'm going to flee to Florida if I lose. Or I think he said that before when he lost the primary, right? Because he lost the primary to Mamdani first. And then I think he was like, I'm moving to Florida. And then the establishment was like, the fuck you are. We're running you as an independent.
You know what? I think to go from being the governor to now trying to run for mayor and take the lesser role, and the person who replaced you as governor, you'd be answering to. I mean, that's really low to begin with. But now that you've lost, you just got to really just disappear. You got to run away. You got to leave. I don't know if going to a red state is the answer. I think maybe country might be the answer. Because your career is over and you should make it stay or gone.
It's wild, right? Yeah. If this was most normal civilized countries, yes, he'd have to flee so he doesn't get rung up on charges. But I think it's wild that, Mamdani got like 54% of the vote. He got like 40 or something. And then Sliwa got like 11%. God bless him for staying in the race. But it's like the one Republican, the actual Republican who's in the race got like 11% of the vote. It's wild.
It's stupid.
And he had the red beret, man. I mean, if anyone looked the part of a revolutionary, it was him.
I just cannot believe these were once again, the best we had to offer. These were the best.
I got to say, though, it's a pathetic list of choices because the choices are limited by whom the party allows to run, right? It's never a quality series of choices. The choices that are going to protect the status quo.
Well, Mamdani doesn't protect anything. They definitely didn't want him to begin with, but it's just like, hey, why don't I run? Might as well.
Well, this is why nobody fought the campaign of Mamdani as hard as the Democrats did.
Because the Republicans were like, we're probably not going to win. Why bother?
It's not all that dissimilar from Trump usurping the 2016 nomination, right, for the Republicans. When you think about it, right? They didn't win, and then he won, and at first they were like, fuck you are, and then they got in line after that. I think, it shows that if you run a progressive candidate who actually talks about doing things for people, actually standing for something and not just against the opposition, you actually have a chance. Now, who knows how his term is actually going to go over the next few years if he actually accomplishes anything that he campaigned on. He might not be able to build the coalitions and the consensus to get that. To get that taken care of. I don't know how
he's going to do most of the things he campaigned on. Most of those things are not things that mayors control. So it's just like, high school. It's like elementary school politics where they're like, we're going to get you a vending machine. Oh, this is great. This is great. Right. Oh, don't worry about me having no ability to make sure that happens.
That's also the Trump campaign, right? It was an 8th grade president, right? Class president. Everyone's going to have free ice cream and soda. Vote for me. And that worked for him, and it's worked for Mamdani too, right? People want. I think about this a lot lately. It's everyone's for years has always referenced that famous JFK speech. Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country, right? It's reverse these days. It's the inverse. It's people want to know, okay, you've been taking and taking. I've been getting less and less. And the people behind the scenes, the politicians, their financial backers have been getting more and more. The equation's inverse now. It's what are you going to do for me because I keep getting fucked.
Yeah,
and I think that's a message that resonates now.
Trump has shown that he could do whatever he wants and he has the power to make things better, but chooses not to and just chooses to enrich himself. He clearly could give everybody free ice cream if he wants. Because the Republicans will be like, yes, master, whatever you say, master. And Democrats are like, oh, great, we love ice cream. So everybody wins.
I mean, honestly, if Donald Trump announced free ice cream Wednesdays, starting immediately, I mean, who's going to argue against that? Right? No one's going to argue against that at all.
Just like maybe the ice cream people will be like, well, we just got to give us some time to be able to prepare that amount of ice cream. So we can start shipping them on a regular basis. Other than that, everybody's going to be like, this is exciting. Only if you vote red, you'll get that.
I'm surprised. I mean, that's Viktor Orban basically did that in Hungary a few years ago. He basically cut checks, like tax refund checks or something, to everyone immediately before the election. They're like, oh, this guy, all right, yeah, he's putting money in my pocket. Cool, I'll keep voting for him.
Oh, God.
I mean, it is the move of dictators and strongmen across the planet to placate the people with, what's the old Roman term? Bread and circuses, right? Keep them fed, keep them entertained, and they'll keep voting for you.
It's like, I'm going to fuck you for 364 days out of the year. One day, I'm going to give you a check so you could forget about the other 364. And there's way too many people who are like, okay.
Yeah. They're like, well, they rationalize it because they're like, well, I'm going to get fucked no matter what, right? The other party, the other parties, the other politicians don't represent me either. So, all right, at least I got something out of this.
That's true.
Yeah. But back to the previous point. Look, what's the worst that happens? Mamdani sucks.
Just
right?
like every other mayor before.
Just like every other New York City mayor. So why not try something new, right? Well, let's break the mold a little bit. Let's stop going with Republican establishment candidates and Democratic establishment candidates, and let's try something new. And again, the worst case scenario is he sucks just like the rest of them, and we're back to where we started. Like,
yeah, I mean, he's not going to be worse than Eric Adams.
Oh my God.
It was like,
I mean, look,
should have been carted off in jail if it wasn't for Trump. So
that's right. I forgot about that. It's amazing. He said something this week where he's like, oh man, he's like, I'm glad this is over with. I can like fly privately and not have you guys digging in on that and stuff. And I'm like, this asshole has so much contempt for the people for the city he was mayor of and just kind of the people who voted for him and he's responsible to. Dude, it's not that you were flying private that people were challenging you. It's that you were getting kickbacks from foreign governments. These were clear and obvious bribes. He had actual issues that need to be taken care of. You can fly private all you fucking want on your own dime. It's when you have blatant, obvious corruption.
Hey, Trump can do it. Why can't I do it?
Kind of, right? It's just this open disdain for people. I mean, fucking Kash Patel, right? Yeah, I mean, he's going after, someone leaked out, right, that he was taking private planes to go watch his girlfriend perform, right, because she's a musician or whatever. Like, again, that's corruption, plain and simple. Doesn't matter what party it is. You're using public taxpayer funds to enrich yourself and give yourself a little freebie there.
Yeah, it's just... And you know what? And all of them could get away with it because they make it just about party. And you have to hate this party so much that you don't have to care about when I do it. That's what it is. Because do you remember all you heard Trump was like, all Obama does is vacation and go golfing. He shouldn't be on the golf course. No president should do this. And he's golfed more than any president ever combined in like a year. It's just like, well, that doesn't count. That doesn't matter. I'm doing business out there for yourself. Yeah,
it's every accusation is a confession at this point, right? If you're out there, you're pointing the finger. It's because it's something you are doing or you want to do. Once you are in power and you start doing it, now you can play the whataboutism game, right?
Yes. That is the phrase that I've probably been searching for like months now, because all I hear out of their mouth is exactly what they're going to do. It's just like, wow, you're basically saying this, but we know you're going to do that. That's exactly
What's all those? It's all those like, Biden's going to send, the police and the military after you. And this is what it's like. He didn't do any of that shit, but you are.
Exactly.
Right. It's, it's just this constant finger pointing just to muddy the waters and get people constantly going, yeah, well, the other guys do it too. It's like, yeah, but they didn't. You keep forgetting to differentiate between what is being said and what is actually happening. It's hilarious to me. Like, we live out here on Long Island. Like, all the people who are just, the conversations are happening about Mamdani, right? And the things that they're saying he's going to do. And I'm like, nothing you're saying that he's going to do has any basis in reality. It's just what you've heard from each other, or it's the talking point. Half the things you're talking about are things that Republicans are doing. But just because it's, now you've attributed this message to someone you don't like, or you've been told to not like, it's suddenly it's a bad thing. And it's almost this adult game of telephone, right? Remember that from kindergarten, or what about rumors and how that message gets spread. It's wild to me. The one thing, silver lining, regardless of anything, again, if Mamdani's amazing, if he's terrible, all this is, I am just looking forward to years and years of just A+ headlines from the New York Post, because this is where they excel. Their headlines are just amazing. They always have been. They always will be. And just, I love to see when they're riled up, right? They got some good shit to go after. So at least I'll be entertained. Mm-hmm. Nero will fiddle while Rome burns, right? That's my approach at this point.
I better pick up a fiddle. Well, like, that's it. Every accusation is a confession. That is exactly it. They're stealing elections. You're going to steal elections. Yeah, that is exactly it. I don't want to forget that. No. All right, what's on the docket for today, my brother?
Well, I think you and I riffed off the cuff last week about No Kings and the growing protest movement here. And I think at the time I mentioned, I researched a bunch of kind of successful and failed movements to have a little bit of context for our discussion. I think our key takeaway, remind me, right? I think what we said was that the protests needed to be tied to something tangible, right? It's like a real world issue, not just like, it wasn't enough to protest something, but to affect change, you needed to make specific demands and have an actual outcome you wanted, right? An actual purpose, not just, I don't like what you're doing. It's, I don't like what you're doing, and I demand this, or I want this as a specific outcome, right? Mm-hmm. I couldn't help but think, as I was kind of thinking through afterwards, I was like, it's Lin-Manuel Miranda in Hamilton, right? Where he says, if you stand for nothing, Burr, what'll you fall for? It's that pivotal line about having clear values and convictions that you're working towards. It's not enough to just be present. It's not enough to vote harder. If we want to see actual meaningful change, we have to demand it. Like, I'm calling you out. I'm calling myself out. I'm calling out everyone listening to the two of us ramble incoherently. We're citizens of a country that's born out of revolution. We love to bask in all the trappings of being revolutionaries, and the country came out of revolution, and we said, no, we refuse to accept this. But when's the last time we actually demanded change in our society in any sort of meaningful way? I think electorally, maybe the Obama vote, right? Back in 2008, he campaigned on hope and change, and then actually governed as this like very party line centrist, right? Establishment guy. That campaign of his was probably the closest to actual meaningful change up until the Trump campaign, right, in 2015, 2016, at that point. But again, and I think now we're starting to see in Trump too, some actual change, right, some actual movement, and not necessarily positive, depending on what your perspective is or what you're concerning. But overall, I think we fussed around the edges with some minor judicial and legislative wins here. Since we passed the New Deal, the Civil Rights Act, what have been the big things? We had judicially, Roe v. Wade. We had Obergefell v. Hodges, which did marriage equality. And ever since then, Roe v. Wade have been overturned. Oberfeld versus v. Hodges is on the docket in the crosshairs at the moment. Equal Rights Amendment was defeated. It hasn't passed, and it's been some 30, 40 years since that was on the docket anywhere. We've already repealed part of the Voting Rights Act, and the second part of the Voting Rights Act is, again, in the crosshairs at the moment. So it's like we've taken all these steps forward 50, 60, 70 years ago, and we've had these minor wins since then, and already those minor wins within a decade or so of them passing are already fundamentally being attacked at the moment, being taken away. And then, of course, Citizens United, right, which I think just perverted the fundamental concept of one vote, one man, one vote.
Right.
Away, right? And we kind of touched on that with redistribution. And now to the point of every accusation is a confession. Like we saw this, I mean, Charlie Kirk and Turning Point USA were talking about this, right? They were taking aim at Martin Luther King Jr. and the Civil Rights Act. And they were saying that these acts and same logic goes into the Voting Rights Act and the attack on it, actually took away freedom by ensuring legislatively that people had freedoms and that they have their rights and that we don't discriminate against those. And so now we've got these people working hard to revoke laws to ensure equality before the law in this country and corrupting that message, right, about equality and equal rights to say, well, you gave those people special rights. It's not you didn't give them special rights. It's they didn't, right, black people, gay people, minorities, women, they don't have special rights. It's that everyone finds these loopholes and squeezes in these laws that restrict their rights and restrict their freedoms. And you got to patch that up legislatively. You've got to cover up those loopholes, but it's being attacked, especially by the right, and especially by conservatives, as, well, they're getting special privileges. And that's how they market it. So it's like, no, they're not getting special privileges. You're finding ways to discriminate legally, and you're attacking these things. So I think we got to look at how we turn that back.
It's a hard pill to swallow for people to understand that. And we do that a lot, is like, we'll pass something like with the gambling and things like that. We spent an eternity not allowing sports gambling. You had to go to certain states and stuff like that. So finally, after all this time, you're like, okay, we're going to pass gambling and allow it in states. But then they're like, but we're not going to really put much rules on it. It's like, you work so hard to get to this place, and now everywhere you turn, somebody's offering me to gamble. The reason why you have these things in place for voting rights is because you spent an eternity trying to prevent them from voting. So, yes, it does like blur the lines of true equality, but it's because you can't be trusted. It's kind of like with the kids and the marshmallows, like, here's marshmallows, don't eat it. Odds are they're going to take the marshmallows. They're going to take the candy. You can't be trusted to let them go and vote like they're supposed to be able to. Because what you're gonna do is be like, okay, everybody has the right to vote, but we're gonna put one polling place within a 30-mile radius of this place, of where they mostly live. That's the problem. That's why there's an affirmative action and all these things existed, is because you couldn't be trusted for all these years. If you want those things to go away, show trust. Show that there is a true improvement. Just by saying there's no more racism doesn't mean there's no more racism. You're never going to get rid of all racism, but show that you're not blatantly racist.
Yeah, I think you touched on something important there, is we have to trust each other, right? And we have to give trust to get trust at the same time. It's the same thing with respect. Respect is earned, not given. And we have to earn each other's trust. But the problem is, when one person is constantly acting in bad faith to undermine that and to gain something for themselves, that starts to snowball, right? Every little step, every little action like that progressively makes it worse and puts us apart. I think this is part of the conversation you and I were having yesterday, right? You kind of get to this point where society seems like it's flying towards the extremes, and there's kind of no middle ground. There's no consensus. There's no kind of common basis, because we're constantly being attacked by bad faith actors. And there's an element of that is external, right? There's troll farms, there's bot farms that are out there amplifying messages online. I think there was an analysis, we talked about this way back when, right? The whole Sydney Sweeney good genes thing, right? Was very much a faked AstroTurf type of response and reaction from the right-wing media, right? To make that much bigger thing than it was. More recently, that whole Cracker Barrel brouhaha, right? About the logo. There's been some analysis. Overwhelmingly, the reaction around that was bot driven. It wasn't even real people posting online. It was just disinformation, misinformation that was being put out there electronically. And so, there's definitely people here who aspire to power and are going to use and take advantage of these things. But it's also, we've got internal and external forces playing against us right now.
Right. But those things only work when you have spent generations dumbing your people to when rarities become common. And it's like, you cannot make these rarities always common. That whole Cracker Barrel thing, why do you think they're changing that? Because their businesses are failing. So you not coming to their restaurants anymore doesn't change the fact that nobody's coming to their restaurants. So that's why they're changing their shit. It's not a woke thing. It's not enough anything. If you were to just go, they wouldn't have changed anything, but you stopped going. And just like anything else, it's like when you make one black person who does a horrible crime or commits something, and that becomes the poster child of all black people, that's a problem. You could have troll farms, whatever, but we've been doing this before that existed.
Yeah.
I mean, there was what is it? The other day, there was like an AI video that Fox played. It was all AI, but it was all black people about SNAP benefits. And I'm not going to get my SNAP benefits. I'm going to have to rob. The government owes me. None of it was real. And Fox never really said it wasn't real. Their retraction was like, it was an AI of people, which is, obviously not real people. But that's what they do. They just put that out there and then let everybody have at it. So
yeah, you have to wonder how much of that was deliberate, right? How much did they know? Yeah, this is complete bullshit, but it fits the narrative, the story we want to put out there. So even if we have to put out there an apology and a retraction, once the message goes out there, it sticks, and there's enough people who choose to believe it that the damage is already done, right? I think the problem is, you made a great point, right? If you look at, satirical magazines or, political commentary in the 60s and the 70s and the 50s, it's the exact same arguments that are happening today, right? The names, places, characters, locations might have changed, right? It's like the disclaimer at the beginning of a movie or a series or whatnot, but the stories are exactly the same. And the difference now is the speed at which these things get shotgunned out there into the universe, and it collectively exceeds our capacity to handle it. And to your point, right, again, I don't think Fox News made a mistake. I think their producers were like, fuck it, this gets the message we want out there. We'll make an apology later, right? It's not like it's going to cost them anything. This isn't like the Dominion thing, right? Where they slandered a company and had to pay $800 million or $787 million in restitution.
Exactly. Who's gonna sue them? The fake black people in the video?
Exactly. What, black people as a whole are going to sue them? No, exactly. And what, the FCC's not going to go after them for putting out blatant lies. So there was no risk to them lying about this at that point. But again, the information gets shotgun out there. Again, we don't have the capacity to filter through all this logically and carefully every single time. And so whether you're a Fox News viewer who wants to believe this and just believes this about black people anyway, or you're someone who's susceptible to believing this and you think, well, of course a mainstream, firm like Fox would vet this before putting it out there, they're going to believe it, right? And the retraction doesn't mean anything at that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, yes, true. But That is why, until those things like that, these mistakes stop, this is why you have certain voting rights acts and you have affirmative action and stuff like that, because you're going out of your way to continue racism and to prevent people from voting and all these other things that you choose to make bigger than they really are.
I think you also have to give Adam people more credit that it's not just racism. It's a lot of it is classism, right?
Yes.
I know people who they'll rant and rave about, black SNAP recipients and welfare queens and this and that. And they'll be like, I'm not racist. I just hate poor people. And I believe them when they say that. I'm like, okay, I'm like, you're stereotyping who the poor people are, but yeah, no, you just don't like poor people. You just don't, you've got an element of that in you. And it happens to be, you can make them look black in your mind. Right. And it's easy to go with that stereotype and to apply that. But what you really don't like is just people who are worse off than you, that you think are getting benefits that you're not getting.
Yeah. Do you remember? I mean, this wasn't pre-internet, but this was the early days of the internet. So there wasn't really any kind of bot farms going on yet. But you remember the surfer dude on Snap who was buying lobsters and things like that from California that Fox promoted so much that all these people are, using their benefits to get lobsters. They just found the one fucking lunatic and just blew him up as the guy who was the exception. Buying. It's like, they're not all this kid. They're not all this dude. Okay, he's exploiting things. There's millions of people exploiting things. Then we should stop. We all should stop using telephones. We should all stop driving. We should all stop doing anything because there's people who exploit insurance. There's people who exploit driving rules. There's people who exploit everything. People, scammers might call you. Everybody stop using your phones. No. So it's the tale of the woman who shows up to pick up her welfare check at the welfare office in her brand new Mercedes. Yeah, and a fur coat and all that stuff.
And fur coat, yeah, and dressed to the nines. Everyone's got that story, and everyone believes it to be true. And at this point, people have convinced themselves that's true. Do you remember, speaking of a few years ago, I don't remember that lobster guy, but do you remember this was, again, early, 2000s or internet. There was the story of the girl whose name was Ladasha, and it was just a hyphen and the letter A.
Yes.
And I remember that, and I was like, okay, that's funny. And then people were like, no, I know this. One of my best friends growing up, he's a teacher, and he's like, I was catching up with him, and he's like, no, it's true. I'm like, you didn't actually see this. He's like, it's true. He's like, there's a girl. And I'm like, dude, come on. You're smarter than this. Like, how are you buying into this at this point? People convince themselves that these things that they're true because they're close enough to the truth. And They see, right, that you can just kind of put what you know onto it.
Because the joke has always been that, they have names like Lexus and all these fancy Gucci and all these other things. But nowadays, you think that Ladash is so crazy, but then you see Elon Musk naming his kids like fucking the craziest things on earth. And he really does. So it can't be that far from the truth anymore.
It's not, right? You think about there's a kid in my kid's school named Elon. I'm like, I know where you got that name, bro. I don't know if you're going to regret that, but I think you're going to regret that about as much as all the kids who named their daughter Daenerys, 7, 8, 10 years ago, right? And they named their kid Khaleesi and things like that. And then suddenly season 8 of Game of Thrones comes out and they suddenly go, oh, that's actually not a good thing, right? There's a turn in the character. So again, yeah, there's enough craziness in the actual world that the bullshit is believable and people jump on it.
Yeah. So that lobster boy guy, it was from 2013, so 12 years ago.
Okay.
And Fox just blew him up because he didn't work. He got $200 a month in food stamps assistance, and he used it to buy fancy things. And he considered it free food. They compared him to the guy I guess Sean Penn's character from Fast Times at Ridgemont High. So it was like the one out of the 100,000 people who are getting food stamps in that area takes advantage of it. The
Again,
1%, you can't put, sometimes one bad apple does spoil a whole fucking thing, but this is stupid. And you got to be able to know at this point what the difference is.
honestly, it's that attitude of mind your own fucking business. What do you care what someone spends their food benefits on? To be honest, everyone should have food benefits at this point, and you should be able to spend it on whatever fucking meal that you want. If you need to buy dollar bags of rice, right, and stretch that as much as possible because you've got 6 kids and you've got to feed the whole family and you've only got that $200, great. If you're just that one single guy and you got that $200 and you're making it just fine, yeah, buy some fucking lobster. I don't care. Feed yourself however you want to feed yourself.
Yeah. If you want that one lobster, that one dime a month, and then because you're saving up for it by eating, I don't know, just rice and beans the rest of the month, that's your business.
Everyone loves to tell poor people how they should be spending their money, but conversely, no one ever tells billionaires how they should spend their money, right? And Billie Eilish called out Zuckerberg this week, right? Yeah. Saying that, like, dude, give away your money, bro. Like, what do you need it for? And she's right. And we don't do that enough. We're happy to tell poor people how to spend their money. We're always happy to take a look at someone who we think is worse off and be like, here's what you should do better. But we never look at people who are wasting money and hoarding it and go, dude, what are you doing? Like, we never like to turn the lens the other way.
Because people have so many dreams, aspirations of being those people, but do you really want to be those people? You want those things, but guess what? They have so much more money than those things require. You don't have to have the biggest yacht in the world. You can have a really big yacht and be really happy.
By the way, those people, right, the wealthy, they get multiple billions of dollars of taxpayer subsidies to get to that point. Their companies, sure, right, to actually achieve that. So if you want to talk about welfare queens, look at the guy with the yacht, not the guy who's literally living in a ditch but buying lobster with his SNAP benefits. That doesn't, that's not the guy who's wasting money, who's not wasting your money. It's exactly the guy who's taking 10-minute trips into space just for shits and giggles.
I don't mind. I want to be that guy.
I will not fight a free trip to space. That's awesome. That would be amazing.
I just would know what I would love to see, like, to send like the 20 leading flat earthers into space so to see what they see, and then how many people will then become flat earthers so they could want to hope to go to space.
I think there was one of them who actually did that. I think he went up in like one of those super high up hot air balloons that they do. And he came back down. He's like, it's fucking round. He's like, I'm done with this flat earth shit. He's like, it's round.
Really? That's awesome.
Yeah, I was reading about that recently. I keep getting pushed like flat earth stuff in my feeds. And I'm like, just because it's funny, it's people like calling out and making fun of flat earth and the arguments that they make. So I kind of poke around a little bit, and because I've engaged with it, naturally the algorithm keeps pushing it to me, join those communities and stuff. But yeah, it's wild, the stuff that I come up with. But yeah, this was one that jumped out at me recently. I'm like, oh, okay, that's interesting. You can convert stupid.
But look what you have to do, how much money you have to spend in order to convert stupid. And that's only on one thing.
It feels like we have to fight too many battles in too many different places against too many deeply entrenched beliefs that don't jive with the real world, that it feels exhausting, right? But if we're going to do that, I think we should pivot back to where we want to start this episode and talk about these protests, right? And again, how do we get to some of these? How do we counter those efforts, right? How do we go against this tide and push back and start to make those demands and start to be the change, right, that we want to see in the world? So I think I want to focus, Adam, on 2 of the protests that I dug in on kind of ahead of last week's episode. And how familiar are you with these 2, with the Hong Kong protests of the last 10 years or so? And how familiar are you with Poland's solidarity movement?
Well, the Hong Kong protests, which I guess ceased to exist a few years ago. Prior to that, I didn't know that until you were telling me about it the other day that they were protesting originally for something else. And the Polish one, I didn't really realize that they had much of that until yesterday as well.
Okay. Yeah, no, there's a lot going on in the world. And I think it's, it always seems like it's over there,
Hmm.
local problems, right? And there's just so much we can learn from it. And I think they want to go through a little bit of background on both of these places and a little bit of the situation and how they got to where they are, because there are obvious differences to both countries. Oh, Hong Kong's not a country, but both places. And there's also some real striking similarities to us. And I think not just go through the history and the timeline of what happened, but specifically how people were perceiving what was going on at that time and how they were feeling about these things. 'Cause I think a lot of it, again, aligns with the way people are feeling and thinking here.
Hmm.
And it should give us some like basis for, okay, what do we want to do next, right? So let's start with Hong Kong.
Okay.
And for me, Hong Kong was interesting because it's a very prominent late holdover of Western imperialism, right? So do you
Right.
know kind of the basic background of like why Hong Kong is what it is today?
Well, I remember the handover, watching the handover from the British when I
Same,
was younger.
same.
Other than that, I don't know too much.
Okay.
I know that when they gave it back, they're like, "You're gonna be good boys with the with Hong Kong, right?" I was like, "Come on."
Yeah, I remember watching that at the time too and being like, everyone's like, okay, hope for the best.
God, we're gonna be great. We're gonna be great.
So there's definitely been some conflict as a result of that. But yeah, so Hong Kong became what it is today because the British, the French, the Germans, the Portuguese, they were all carving up China and the Far East back in the 19th century. The Opium Wars, the Sino-French War, the Sino-Japanese War, China, the Qing Dynasty, just getting its ass handed to it. And so it was sending off Macau to the Portuguese, Hong Kong to the British, and signing off. I think it gave away Vietnam as well and certain other territories to the French. And so Hong Kong's probably the most famous one. So the British had it through various treaties back in the mid 19th century. And in 1898, they signed a 99-year lease. And so it's so funny because it's not funny. They basically signed this contract at gunpoint. They really didn't have a choice, right? And a lot of what happened, actually, if you think about China today and how it acts towards Taiwan, and a lot of the attitudes you see from Xi Jinping and the
Hmm.
Chinese Communist Party, right, comes from this time period. It's why they're so super nationalistic and why they're always about like there's one China, one China, one China, because they got carved to hell less than 200 years ago. And I look at that and kind of digging in on Hong Kong, I realized, a lot of that attitude is in the same way we teach the American Revolution and the actions of the colonists and the redcoats and just kind of the lasting impact that had in our founding documents here in America. I think, and that's just not my own view from having read into some of this. Actually, I saw this is from an interview with some Hong Kong locals who are part of the who had observed and were part of the protest back in 2019. The quote is, "It's no exaggeration to say that the founding myth of this city is that refugees and dissidents fled communist persecution to build an oasis of wealth and freedom, a fortress of civil liberties safeguarded by the rule of law. In view of that, on a mundane level, it could be said that many in Hong Kong already understand themselves as being in revolt in the way they live and the freedoms they enjoy, and that they consider this identity, however vacuous and tenuous it may be, to be a property that has to be defended at all costs." End quote. I mean, you could just change communist persecution, right, to British and change, Hong Kong to the New World or the colonies. And that fits right in with the American Revolution right there, right? In the way America perceives itself. We have these freedoms. This is where you go for opportunity, and everywhere else is terrible.
It's funny is that as you were saying that, I'm thinking we all like live in a world where we're always hoping for some form of originality and something new, something different, something that's not been has not happened before. But we're always continuously repeating our histories in different forms, but it's always the same. The freedom is always the same, and we don't look forward enough to building new shit. But we're always repeating the same thing. We're always fighting for freedom, but then we're forgetting what that freedom is, and then we're fighting for it again. It's just like this constant story that is, and there's not enough people who are just like, this doesn't work. Let's stop doing it. Please, let's stop doing it. And
No, for God.
I was going to say, it's just countless amounts of times just hearing the same thing. As we've talked over the weeks, you just hear the same thing over and over again. It just repeats itself in different, stranger, more unique ways, but it's always the same problem. And let's just do it again. Let's see if it's different this time.
It's history repeats, brother. Yeah, and I think the more we dig in on these things, the more and more we're going to realize that we're stupid as a species, making the same fucking mistakes. And again, I think what I say earlier, right? It's like the names, places, and characters change.
Yep.
But the story is exactly the same over and over, right?
Nothing
and
unique about us. Even though we've technically gotten smarter, we really haven't.
Yeah. And I think for Hong Kong especially, right, it gets broken down as this microcosm of communism versus capitalism, especially here in America, right? Because we've been so vehemently anti-communist for solidly a century at this point. But yeah, it's the underlying factors and the incentives and the way people feel is take away the isms, right? Take away the names, and it's exactly the same motivations behind it.
It's just our one way of thinking, that it's one way or another way, and there's no in between that might actually work better. That's where it just really comes down to.
So Hong Kong handed over beginning around 1900, 100 years, goes through 1997. So here's the thing, right? Hong Kong, even under British rule, had lots of protests and riots throughout the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s for a number of different reasons. Some of them were like pro-China Communist Party riots. Some were anti-colonialism riots. Some were protests and riots against economic deprivation and opportunity and whatnot. So I think if we reflect on that statement that many in Hong Kong already understand themselves as being in revolt in the way they live and the freedoms they enjoy, and that they consider that identity to be a property to be defended, right? Again, it's very similar to the way a lot of Americans perceive themselves. And boiling all this down to anti-communism or pro-capitalism is just missing the point around it. Also, with Hong Kong specifically, and just kind of in my research on this, there's an ingrained element of non-violence when they protest and when they stand up to the establishment. They call it Hong Kong civility. And even when police are attacking protesters violently and the protesters respond in kind, there's a legacy of the relationship with mainland China where any sort of quote unquote violence is the work of provocateurs from the Communist Party who are trying to just get a response and reaction on. And when you look at, the George Floyd protests, you look at Portland, you look at anything that's happened here, Ferguson and whatnot, there's plenty of undercover police officers and agent provocateurs who are, they're the guy who's in the crowd is going like, we got to throw bricks, we got to throw Molotovs, we got to get violent, we got to start smashing shit up because they want to incite the crowd to get a response from the police so that they can crack down. And so the Hong Kongers are very, maybe too much so, conscious of, look, if we start getting violent, it's not just we're going to have to deal with our local authorities, but China itself might go, this shit isn't working, and crack down with the army, right, from the mainland. So in 1984, the UK signed an agreement with China for the expiration of the 99-year term. And basically 4 things would be included. Hong Kong would become a special administrative region of China. They would retain a high degree of autonomy under the one country, two systems principle. Capitalism would remain unchanged for 50 years. So through 2047, they would leave capitalism alone. And rights and freedoms, including judicial independence, freedom of speech and assembly, all those would be preserved, right? So basically, Hong Kong gets to kind of keep going for a period of 50 years after its handover, which we're a little over halfway through at this point. So like I said, there were protests against the British colonial rule for various reasons, but for the most part after handover, things were normal. So in 2011, Occupy Wall Street happened, right here, Zuccotti Park in New York.
Yeah.
Hong Kong had their own version of that as well at the same time. It wasn't just a local thing here to the US. By 2012, that got dispersed. The last of that kind of anti-banker, right, Occupy Wall Street sentiment got broken down. In 2013, there was a port strike that happened by some workers right at the main dock in the city. It fizzled out and not a lot happened. They didn't really have anything to show for it, right? Hong Kongers had issues with the ruling class, but that inherent push for civility and niceness really neutered the protests up until this point. It kind of shot themselves in the foot. In 2014, though, these things kind of came to a head. In August of that year, the Chinese National People's Congress released what's called the 831 decision, which called for Hong Kong's chief executive to be pre-screened and nominated for election through the election committees that existed at the Chinese Communist Party in the mainland. So it essentially means anyone who could run in the elections had to be Communist Party approved. And the Hong Kongers were like, no fucking way. That's not how it's going to work. So what ended up happening was a 79-day long street protest, started largely by various student groups who were kind of spiritual successors to the Occupy Wall Street movement and that port strike that had started. So some workers, mostly students. They started by doing sit-ins and boycotts. They also occupied several public sites, including the government headquarters on the ground. And so it was a few thousand students at most to begin with. But after a few days and whatnot, the government and the police were like, all right, enough, get out of here. They took a hardline approach. And so they tolerated it first, but then they brought out tear gas and riot tactics. And they shot some 50, 60 rounds of tear gas into these crowds, just these few thousand students. And the students, being students, right, in 2014, they put them on social media. They broadcasted live to the world what was happening,
right,
to show the world and to generate sympathy for what was happening. So once that happened, ordinary citizens in Hong Kong, not just the students, were like, what the fuck are you doing? Why are you shooting tear gas and, raiding these students with batons and such? Suddenly, ordinary citizens and professionals joined in the protest. And what came to be known as the Yellow Umbrella Protest peaked between 80 and some 200,000 people across multiple locations in the city.
It's like, cause you're like, listen, my kids might be protesting and maybe I think they're dumb or not, but you can't fucking beat them. Now I'm going out there and protesting.
Well, that's what it is. So the Hong Kongers have this weird relationship with their police forces, right? They fundamentally look at them as being Hong Kongers, not Chinese mainlanders. Mm-hmm. And so they ultimately view them as the police are on our side, right? We ultimately need you to be together with us because China, there's this fear that China is just going to send in the army and crush them at any point. And they're like, we're Hong Kongers, you're Chinese mainlanders. The police, even though you represent the government, you should be on our side. And so there's this weird back and forth. So once the police start getting violent, that's when people get pissed because like, what the fuck? You're supposed to be with us. You're supposed to be on our side, right? And that's why we generally aren't violent to you because we understand that. So what happened next? Again, quoting from that kind of interview I mentioned earlier, the tactical stagnation of the protests could allow the government to simply wait them out, as the protesters' own inaction delegitimizes them in the eyes of more casual participants. There are already complaints from people who have newly joined the protests that the entire movement seems to be simply drifting with no real force leading it forward. So that's what happened, right? These students are kind of doing this sit-in and class boycotts at these locations. Then it gets violent and people come in and they're like, okay, what are we going for? And the students are like, well, we don't really have a goal, right? We don't really have a next step that we're trying to do. So you suddenly get these numbers and now the police are getting violent. People join in. They're like, cool, we're here. We're in. What are we going to do? And people are like, well, we don't know. We don't actually have a plan here. And so that's what happens. The government they took a war of attrition kind of approach, and the police, they slowly worked their way through the crowds. And by mid-December, the last holdouts had been cleared from their encampments, and the leadership afterwards was arrested around that.
It's hard. It's hard in this sense is because you're on a little island. And so you're protesting for something that is at this point kind of controlled by the main island.
Yes.
And so it's like, all right, keep protesting. I don't give a shit. If you fuck up your economy, it's not going to affect us, and it's going to just affect you. So keep going. We'll wait you out. We got all the time in the world. That's a problem. If it doesn't spread to other parts, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. We're kind of gonna kind of get to that here shortly. So, and again, that's kind of what we talked about last week, right? Your protests, your standing up to the establishment, it needs a purpose, right? It needs a goal that it's working towards. It's not enough to just stand up against something that they're doing. You have to stand up for something. And that was actually from this, again, a quote from this protest. When asked what their goals are, many will respond with a parroted list of demands, incredibly consistent across different social groups and different age groups. But when pressed about why they want these things, most protesters immediately jump to economic rather than purely political problems. So you talk about like skyrocketing rent, economic inequality, inflation in the price of food and transportation, right? That was in 2014. They're complaining about these things. Cross the ocean, jump a decade ahead, and literally nothing has changed. These exact same pressures are happening here. But
what's the problem? What's the point? Like, if you're saying, like, I want to get rid of the politicians who are, China's trying to control on this island. No, the answer is no. So now what you need to have a next step.
Yep.
And they're in a situation where there kind of is no next step unless they leave the island and go directly to the capital of Beijing, where they will be shot dead immediately.
Well, welcome to your new holding camp. Exactly. Right? That's the problem, right? Their complaints are about economic issues and lifestyle issues, fortunately, as a result. And this is part of why once they started to get some numbers, shit fell apart, right? And they were easily dispersed. So now that's 2014. Fast forward 5 years, and another bill is introduced in the Chinese Congress that would make it possible to extradite fugitives from Hong Kong to other locations, including to mainland China. And so what that did was that stoked fear of political repression and end to the judicial impartiality. That was part of the basic law. And generally a loss of freedom, right? If China could just decide you get extradited after you get arrested for whatever and decide that it's subversive or whatever, and now you're subject to Chinese courts and not Hong Kong courts, well, suddenly you're fucked, right? You no longer have the rights and freedoms that you expect as a Hong Konger because now you're subject to Chinese law. And so hundreds of thousands marched for months, starting in around March of 2019, running through about May to early June, protesting it. Huge gatherings and largely peaceful. They were like, hell no, we don't want this. And so by June 9th, they had 1 million people in the streets protesting this peacefully. After a day of marching on June 9th, some of them tried to break into the Legislative Assembly building, and they failed to do so. After a few more days, by June 12th, there were twice as many. There were about 2 million people in the streets. And this is about a quarter of the population.
Yeah, I was going to say, how many people live in Hong Kong?
Yeah, so this went from like about 1/8 of the population to 1/4 of the population within 3 days. That day, the 12th, was when the extradition bill was actually being discussed in the Legislative Assembly. And they again tried to break into the building at that point. Police escalated the use of force, as would be expected, tear gas, rubber bullets, and the protesters started to counter. They started throwing umbrellas, bricks, and bottles at the police who had escalated their use of force.
So classy, umbrellas.
Well, I think they had the umbrellas in hand because they were using the umbrellas to help counter the tear gas. That was
right.
That was something that they had learned during the 2014
using
riots,
the spears.
Not as spears, no. Though in theory, yes. If you ever use an umbrella, Adam, they're pretty fucking flimsy.
Oh, if you have a good one, I have some good golf umbrellas. You close those things up, you chuck them, take an eye out for sure.
Yeah. So kind of like we talked about Italy's years of lead, violence ratcheted as it always does. So police escalated, then the protesters escalated, and then the police escalated again. So the police started to use crowd control tactics indiscriminately, and the protesters started to shift from a defensive footing to more of an offensive one. As the police violence escalated, so did the protesters' response. So I'm going to quote again from that interview. It's no exaggeration to say that we are witnessing the appearance of a generation that is prepared for imprisonment, something that was formerly restricted to quote unquote professional activists at the forefront of social movements. At the same time, there is no existing discussion regarding what the force of law is, how it operates, or the legitimacy of the police and prisons as institutions. People simply feel they need to employ measures that transgress the law in order to preserve the sanctity of the law. End quote.
I mean, you have that many people out in the streets, you all can't go to jail.
Yeah, exactly. But it starts to become, they're starting to change the mentality at that point. They're going, we know we're breaking the law, but we're breaking the law because we feel we need to defend the law. Right, from attacks on it, which is an interesting mentality that you start to build up for themselves. And at that point, Hong Kongers started to take a lot of initiative for themselves, right? So previously you had this, again, very peaceful, quiet protest. Now the police are starting to crack down on you, tear gas, rubber bullets, and batons. They go, fuck it, let's come up with new things. So ideas for quote unquote non-cooperation activity sprung up organically among the crowd, right? Again, now you've got a quarter of the population out there protesting. You can't, it's not coming from just one central group. People are starting to think about, all right, what else can I do? So they did things like jam up the subway lines with people and luggage so that people couldn't travel around the city. They talked about canceling bank accounts and withdrawing cash in mass withdrawals to threaten the currency and to do a run on the banks. They also started to spread suggestions, and I love this one, how to dodge taxes to starve the government revenues. And not just at that moment, but going forward, right? How do we say fuck you to the government? So
that's the problem. Once that goes, once you all realize that if you all stop paying taxes, well, then shit will get real fast. Because there's nothing they can really do about making you, especially in a number that large, it's going to get ugly.
I mean, it's the same here, right? We don't use our financial might as a people enough. If you really wanted change in this country, everyone, and I mean everyone, or at least a significant portion of people, don't pay your bills this month. Don't pay your rent. Don't pay your mortgage. Don't pay your car bill. Don't send money for your credit card. If enough people do that in this country, right? I think all you need is somewhere between 5 and 10% for the assets that are backed by those things held by the banks to start falling into default territory and to start, financial panic. That's all you need at this point. So again, Hong Kong, much smaller population, smaller. It's an island, right? Not a country that spans a continent, but that's the approach they started to take. And so psychologically, protests stopped being something for the Hong Kongers that they just did in the streets. And it became something that they engaged where they live, where they work, in their everyday lives. And one last time, quoting for that interview, at this time, it feels surreal that everybody around us is so certain, so clear about what they need to do. Oppose this law with every means that they have available to them. So protests, this is where it gets good and bad, Adam, right? Protests started to become ingrained in the people of Hong Kong. But in response to the police violence, the protesters also started, not just doing nonviolent action like we just talked about. They also started to vandalize government buildings. They started to build roadblocks, and they also started to boycott mainland associated businesses. So shit started to get real. Where it really started to get ugly was on July 21st. So this is about 6 weeks, right? 5-6 weeks after that, attacking the government building. Triads, who were believed to be under the direction of a local pro-Beijing politician, assaulted protesters and civilians at a train station. And the police just stood by and watched. They arrested very few of those assaulters, and they charged none of them. And so this is the moment that people got enraged against the police. Because again, remember, they're generally trying to you're our people, you're Hong Kongers, you're with us. That's when people got pissed. They're like, that at that point, they started attacking the police stations themselves because they're like, you're supposed to be with us. Why are you allowing criminal gangs under the direction of, mainland aligned politicians to beat us? Yeah. So tear gas, beanbag rounds, rubber bullets, and mass arrests were run by security forces, and they were met now in residential areas, not just public areas, by the protesters. And more they were met by Molotovs, vandalism, and open street clashes by the activists. This shit's getting ugly real fast. Starting in September and then finally in October, the protesters' demand that the extradition bill be withdrawn was achieved. But they also had several other demands, which was mostly, hey, you have to declassify these as riots. You have to not prosecute anyone who was involved in the leadership, and a few others, right? They wanted accountability for the police that they thought had escalated unnecessarily and also were not helpful in a lot of ways. They wanted accountability, right, from the government, and they didn't get any of those other things. That they got the bill withdrawn, but they didn't get anything else that happened since. At this point, Adam, the police are using live rounds, and they're also besieging universities and the central protesters' locations. Again, the protesters are regularly tossing Molotovs. They're using slingshots, and they're creating makeshift weapons to attack the police. And they're creating fortified zones, not just barricades in the roads to slow things down. They're basically creating little forts.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't realize it got to that point.
It got real ugly. Yeah. So that's the thing. Then COVID hits, right?
Oh, good old magical COVID.
Good magical COVID, right? And so at that point, you couldn't have the mass gatherings anymore. And resistance started to shift towards like small scale flash mobs, symbolic and online resistance, than outright clashes and, kind of street occupations. By June of 2020, Beijing imposed the national security law, right? So this wasn't Hong Kong passing a law. This was Beijing imposing a law. It's called the national security law. And basically stripped Hong Kongers of a number of freedoms, shut down the free press and civil groups, and led to the mass arrest of civilians and activists that were involved. Essentially, the one country, two systems facade that had been under since 1997 is essentially gone at this point. So the overt street violence subsided, but the riot control approach that the police had taken essentially transformed into the legal basis for a security state. And the government violence that in the approach that they took now essentially became institutionalized as best practice.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So the protests are done for now. But like I said, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, after the handover, and again, 2014 to 2019, I think Hong Kong, these protests are done for now, but they're not done, right? I think this is just kind of I think they've hit a mental tipping point based on the interviews that I read and kind of what's going on the ground. I think they felt the need to resist that extradition bill, but they didn't really know what it meant in practice. They just knew that it was a potential encroachment on their freedoms. And now they've lost some of their freedoms as a result because of the national security law. And they've got 20 more years, right? 21, 22 more years until the expiration of the basic law, the whole one country, two systems transition period. I think the reasons for protesting that bill were obscure. Even legal scholars were like, we don't really know what this means, but people felt it was an encroachment on their freedoms. The clock's still ticking, and I think we're going to see more from them sooner than later. And I think they're going to start to have clarity of purpose as the whole Chinese, handover to mainland communist China gets closer.
It sounds like it's going to be like more of a somber movement, because they're going to just slowly, if they've gotten this far now with restraining their freedoms, they're just going to, every year, they'll just go, let me take a little more from you, take a little more from you. So when the handover is time, they'll be like, oh shit, we don't have any more freedoms to fight for. We got to fight for them all again.
I think when you and I were talking about this earlier the other day, right? I mentioned like COVID hits, and a nice, interesting conspiracy point is, did China release COVID to crack down on these protests?
I mean, now like knowing even more, the coincidence is like incredibly, I mean, how fortunate is that, knowing where things were headed, and all of a sudden, not only does a virus come, but it's a virus that you got to stay indoors for a little while. and break what you've been doing of congregation. So you're used to grouping together to fight something. Now it's like, no, now you can't be near each other. No, you're not gonna be able to be near each other now. I mean, God, that's really a coincidence. I hate coincidences that are that good.
It's a good one, right? And it's a lot more, I don't want to say it's more plausible than the accidental lab leak, right? That kind of theory that went out there that's believed to be, or even that China did this on purpose to fuck up the Trump administration, right? Which is kind of the perspective we get here from some Looney Tunes on the right.
Yeah, because that makes zero sense.
That makes sense.
Let's fuck Trump by destroying everybody else in the world.
The U.S. is China's biggest trading partner. Why would they try to torpedo this? Yeah, Trump takes a lot of tough talk, but China's handling it for the most part, right? Trying to destabilize. And by the way, you don't really know how he's going to respond and how that's going to look electorally for Trump, right? Like that just seems like it's so far-fetched and out there that that he would have fumbled it and then lost an election as a result. It's a lot more feasible that they wanted to crack down on domestic protests if you're going to go that conspiracy route, that this was a deliberate thing.
Yeah, because like, why would you release it in your country if you want to fuck up Trump? Why wouldn't you just have somebody smuggle it into fucking the United States and do it there? Why would you do it where you are first?
You release it in your own country for a domestic power grab, and you have a situation that's getting out of hand progressively that calls for a power grab. It makes a lot more sense that if China released a virus to try to counteract this, right, went to chemical warfare, that they were targeting Hong Kong and it got out of control. That's the more likely scenario, at least in my mind. Again, I think you and I should take off our tinfoil hats for a little bit. Maybe take a break.
Just put it on.
Let's take a little break, and I think we should pick this up in part 2. Adam, how you feeling so far?
How am I feeling? I'm feeling fine. I'm feeling spry.
Feeling spry. I love it.
It's just sad to just hear the same thing over and over again of like, I mean, it makes all sense in the world. You know, it's not like the Chinese people mean anything, it seems, to their government. If you do something wrong, they're going to punish you severely. So what's a little virus spread around to like make you go home? What's a few deaths? What's the big deal? It's not like it's that big of a deal for so many of those people in the high up in the Communist Party. So it makes total sense.
And on that conspiracy note, Adam, let's wrap up part 1 here, and we'll see everyone in part 2, where we continue with Poland and a successful set of protests and a revolt, and maybe something else we can learn from there.
Sounds good.
All right, catch y'all soon. Bye.
Bye. Idiots Seeking Village is a production of Village Idiots Media. For more, find us online at villageidiotmedia.com or find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon, and wherever you get podcasts.